Picture this. You are walking through the desert of the modern social landscape. You see something captivating, a flash of color, a graceful movement. Your biological programming, the code written into your DNA over millions of years, sends a signal to your brain. Approach, connect, engage. It is the most natural impulse in human history, but then your logical brain kicks in. The survival mechanism overrides the biological imperative. You stop. You freeze. You turn around and walk away. Why? Because you realized something that society refuses to admit. As one of our community analysts, Azrob, accurately observed, they are like trying to pet a rattlesnake. Think about that metaphor. Only a fool would risk a lethal bite for the momentary pleasure of touching something beautiful. Yet, society looks at you, the man walking away from the snake, and calls you a coward. They call you lazy. They say you have fear of rejection. They write articles asking, "Where have all the good men gone?" But here is the brutal truth. Men have not stopped approaching because they are afraid of a woman saying no. A simple rejection is a scratch. Men can handle scratches. Men have stopped approaching because they have finally performed a cost-benefit analysis, and the results are catastrophic. Let's look at the data. Let's conduct an audit of the current market. In the previous economic cycle, your grandfather's era, the risk of approaching a woman was minimal. The worst-case scenario was a moment of awkwardness. The potential return on investment, or ROI, was a lifetime partner, a family, an asset that appreciated over time. Today, the market has crashed. The volatility index is through the roof. To understand this collapse, let's examine a case study from our archives. Let's look at a man we will call Robert. Robert is not a villain. He isn't a creep lurking in the shadows. Robert is a legacy investor, operating with outdated data. He believed that if he was polite, respectful, and direct, the market would treat him fairly. 5 years ago, Robert identified a potential partner. He felt the biological signal. He initiated a transaction. He flirted. He asked her out. In a sane world, this is called courtship. In the modern world, this is called a liability. Listen to Robert's own testimony. This is the raw data from the field. I stopped approaching 5 years ago when I was accused of sexual harassment for flirting and asking a woman out. Let that sink in. Accused of sexual harassment, not for touching, not for vulgarity, not for aggression, but for flirting and asking a woman out. Because the recipient of his offer decided, after the fact, that his interest was unwanted. And in this new economy, unwanted equals criminal. Robert didn't just get rejected. He incurred a massive penalty. His reputation was threatened. His social standing was leveraged against him. The cost of that one interaction, that one attempt to be a man, wiped out his desire to participate in the market forever. So, when Robert decides to stay home, play video games, and focus on his career instead of chasing women, is he giving up? Is he weak? No. Robert is a smart risk manager. He looked at the chart. He saw that the reward was minimal. A date with someone who likely views him as an ATM or a backup option. He saw that the risk was nuclear, an HR complaint, a social media shaming, a permanent stain on his record. The math doesn't math. The risk-reward ratio is completely inverted. This is the Rattlesnake Index. When the downside of saying hello is the potential destruction of your life, the only rational move, the only logical move, is strategic withdrawal. You are not crazy for noticing this. You are not incel for calculating the odds. You are simply a rational actor in a market that has become hostile to your existence. But the snakebite isn't the only risk. The venom goes deeper than just a bad social interaction. There is a systemic machine built to ensure that even if you survive the approach, you can still lose everything you have built. If you think Robert's story is an isolated incident, if you think, that won't happen to me, I'm a nice guy, then you are dangerously naive about the institutional weapon waiting to fire. You can recover from a financial crash. You can find another job if you get fired. These are external assets. But what happens when the market crash doesn't just take your money, it takes your humanity? Welcome to psychological bankruptcy. We often hear the argument, women are afraid of being killed. Men are just afraid of being laughed at. This is a convenient lie. It minimizes the devastating impact of modern rejection. In the current market, women don't just reject a bid. They don't just say, no, thank you. They perform a hostile takeover of your self-worth. They dismantle your ego for sport. Let's examine the file of a young man we will call Sean. Sean's case is critical because it highlights the intersection of biological vulnerability and modern cruelty. Sean is neurodivergent. He has autism and ADHD. In economic terms, he is operating with a different operating system than the market standard. Sean did what society told him to do. He built a friendship first. He invested time. He waited for the right moment. And then, he made his offer. He confessed his feelings to a girl he had known for a long time. Prepare yourself for the return data. This wasn't a soft letdown. This was a targeted drone strike. Here is Sean's testimony regarding her exact words. Excuse me? You think you have a chance with me? People with autism and ADHD like you don't deserve love. People like you don't deserve love. Analyze that sentence. She didn't say, I'm not attracted to you. She didn't say, we are just friends. She declared that his genetic stock was worthless. She attacked his biological reality. She told him that because of how he was born, factors completely outside of his control, like his height or his neurology, he was disqualified from the human experience of love. This is not rejection. This is psychological liquidation. And what is the ROI of such trauma? What does this do to a man's brain? It corrupts the software. It installs a virus of hatred that is almost impossible to remove. Sean admits the aftermath openly. When she told me that, it caused me to develop an unconditional hatred and rejection of normal people. He withdrew from the market, not out of logic, but out of a defensive rage. He built a wall to keep the normal people, the predators, out. But the story doesn't end there. Here comes the twist that proves how deep the bankruptcy goes. A few years later, the global pandemic hit. The market shifted violently for everyone. Sean received news about the woman who had liquidated his soul. I was told she contracted COVID and passed away. Now, pause. What is the expected human reaction? Sadness? Empathy? No. Not when you have been bankrupted. Not when your humanity has been stripped away by cruelty. Sean felt the only thing the market had left him with. In that moment, I was glad she was gone. This is the darkest valley of the male experience. Sean realized later that this feeling was wrong. He realized that celebrating her death made him no better than her. He recognized the moral hazard. But the fact remains. The cruelty of her rejection was so profound that it overrode his basic empathy. It turned a normal man into someone who felt relief at another human's death. That is the cost of engagement. We see this pattern everywhere. Look at the comments in our database. Look at user AINNICJAN2431. Women stopped being hard to get and became difficult to want. Or, user HRA's Rob56 again, they are like trying to pet a rattlesnake. The rattlesnake doesn't just bite your hand, it poisons your blood. It makes you bitter. It makes you cold. It turns you into the very thing they accuse you of being. So, when we see men walking away, when we see men refusing to approach, it is not just to save their careers, it is to save their souls. They are protecting themselves from becoming monsters. They are protecting themselves from the darkness that consumed Sean for those few years. If the price of participation is your dignity, and the price of rejection is your humanity, then the only logical, rational economic choice is to let the market crash. But if the market has crashed, and if the apps are a scam, and if real-life approaches are illegal, what is left? Is it just a void? Is it just emptiness? Or is there a 0 point, a place where the math finally stops hurting? Let's calculate the zero ROI game in the next section. You are probably sitting there, listening to this and thinking, well, I don't go to bars. I don't cold approach women on the street. I am a professional. I am a gentleman. I am safe. That is the single most dangerous delusion in the modern male psyche. You think you are playing a game of romance where the worst outcome is rejection. You are wrong. You are playing a game of Russian roulette where the gun is pointed at your livelihood, and the trigger is held by a system designed to believe the accuser by default. Here is the twist that nobody sees coming until the handcuffs are on. Metaphorically or literally. In the old world, you were innocent until proven guilty. In the modern institutional landscape, within HR departments, universities, and the court of public opinion, the burden of proof has shifted. You are guilty until you can prove you didn't do it. And sometimes, even proving you didn't do it doesn't matter. The accusation itself is the sentence. Let's talk about the authority gap. This is the massive disparity between the power a woman has to destroy your reputation and the power you have to defend it. It is a weaponized imbalance. To illustrate this volatility, we need to open a file on a man we will call Arthur. Arthur represents the blue chip stock of men. He isn't a young, reckless kid. He is a veteran. Based on the data provided to us, Arthur was 62 years old. He had served 40 years in his industry. He was just 3 years away from retirement. Think about the sunk cost here. 40 years of building a reputation. 40 years of accumulating assets. He is at the finish line. He is the safest bet in the room. But the market doesn't care about your tenure. Here is Arthur's direct testimony regarding what happened next. I had someone at work try to leverage the Me Too thing against me. She was believed. Stop. Rewind. She was believed. Notice he didn't say, she presented evidence. He didn't say, there were witnesses. He said she was believed. This is the mechanism of the institutional weapon. The corporate immune system is designed to protect the company, not you. When a woman points a finger and whispers the word harassment, the company calculates the risk. Defending you, high risk. Firing you, low risk. The math is simple. You are a liability. She is a protected class. Arthur continues, I was eventually cleared, but that took 2 years. Eventually, most of the truth came out that I did nothing at all. Now, the optimists among you might say, see? The system works. He was cleared. You are missing the point. You are looking at the result, not the cost. Imagine being 62 years old. Instead of planning your retirement party, you spend 2 years, 730 days, living under a cloud of suspicion. Your colleagues look at you differently. The whispers stop when you enter the room. Your stress levels spike, destroying your cortisol regulation. The legal fees, the mental anguish, the sleepless nights. Arthur paid a massive opportunity cost to defend against a phantom. He won the battle, but look at the damage to the infrastructure. His conclusion is the most chilling part of this audit. The damage was done. I no longer trust any of them. This is the black pill moment. Arthur realized that his 40 years of good guy equity meant nothing. It evaporated the moment an accusation was leveraged. He realized that any interaction, not just dating, but purely social, carries a hidden risk premium that is too high to pay. And this brings us to the next uncomfortable twist. Why is this happening? Is it just bad luck? No. It is a feature, not a bug. The system has incentivized victimhood. In economics, we know that incentives drive behavior. If you give someone a nuclear weapon and tell them, you can use this to destroy your enemies, gain sympathy, and elevate your social status, and there will be zero consequences if you are wrong. What do you think will happen? They will use it. Arthur's accuser faced no penalty for her false claim. She leveraged a social movement to attack a coworker. She failed, but the attempt cost her nothing. It cost Arthur 2 years of his life. This is asymmetric warfare. One side has infinite ammo. The other side is fighting for survival with their hands tied. So, interact with me here. Look at your own life. Do you have a female coworker you joke with? Do you have a female friend you text late at night? Ask yourself, if she decided tomorrow, for any reason, a mood swing, a misunderstanding, a need for attention, to reframe that relationship as predatory, could you stop her? Do you have the recordings? Do you have the witnesses? Or is it just her word against yours? If the answer scares you, good. That fear is your rational brain finally waking up to the reality of the market. But it gets worse. Because while the legal system can destroy your career, the biological reality of modern dating destroys your soul. We have talked about the risk of losing your job. Now, we need to talk about the risk of losing your mind. You think the laws are cruel? Wait until you see the psychological bankruptcy waiting for you in the dating market itself. So, you survived the legal minefield of the office. You survived the psychological warfare of the friend zone. And you think, maybe technology is the answer. Maybe I'll just use the apps. It's efficient. It's safe. Gentlemen, let me save you some time. The dating app ecosystem is not a marketplace. It is a casino. And in a casino, the house always wins. You are not the customer. You are the product. You are the active user metric they sell to shareholders. If they actually found you a wife, they would lose a paying subscriber. Their algorithm is designed to keep you single, desperate, and swiping. Don't believe me? Let's look at the ledger. We have a financial report from one of our viewers, Moist Toucan. He kept the receipts. He tracked the data. Here is the audit of 5 years of effort. 4 dating apps, 5 years, 8 matches. Let's break that down further. Of those 8 matches, 3 instantly unmatched. 2 replied. 1 was willing. 0 success. 5 years. Think about what you could have built in 5 years. You could have learned a new language. You could have started a business. You could have reshaped your body in the gym. Instead, that energy was poured into a black hole that returned 0. 0. This is a zero ROI game. In any other sector of the economy, if you invested 5 years and got 0 return, you would declare bankruptcy and shut down the division. You wouldn't keep investing. You would fire the CEO. But here is where I want to talk to you. Yes, you. The one listening to this in your car, or at the gym, or late at night when the house is quiet. I know you're tired. I know you have swiped until your thumb went numb. I know you have sent thoughtful messages, asking about her interests, trying to be distinct from the "hey beautiful" guys, only to be left unread. Or worse, to be ghosted the moment you asked for a coffee. I want you to take a deep breath. It is not your fault. You are not ugly. You are not boring. You are not broken. You are simply a normal man trying to operate in a hyperinflated market where average women demand top-tier assets while offering absolutely no liquidity in return. As another observer, Nick, brilliantly noted, women stopped being hard to get and became difficult to want. That is the shift. The supply is high, but the quality is distressed. Why would you fight for a prize that drains your bank account, threatens your freedom, and offers you nothing but stress? I want to hear from you. I want you to open the comments section right now. It is your safe space. It is your confessional. Tell me your stats. How many years? How many apps? What was your ROI? Tell me the moment you realized it was a scam. Let it out. Unburden yourself. Because keeping that frustration inside is what kills you. Writing it down. Sharing it with men who understand. That is the first step to peace. Because once you accept that the game is rigged, you stop trying to win it. You stop feeding the machine. And when you stop feeding the machine, something magical happens. The silence isn't lonely anymore. The silence becomes profitable. You start to realize that walking away isn't a tragedy. It is a victory lap. Let's talk about that victory in our final section. Let's talk about the prince who lived happily ever after. Alone. We have analyzed the risk. We have audited the losses. We have seen the bankruptcy. Now, let's talk about the profit. Society wants you to believe that a man without a woman is a failure. They want you to believe that if you aren't chasing, you are losing. But one of our wisest community members, Tamadeus, shared a story, a fairy tale for the modern age, that completely destroys that narrative. It is the shortest, most accurate fairy tale ever written. Listen closely. Once upon a time, there was a handsome prince who asked a beautiful princess to marry him. The princess said, no. In the Disney version, the prince would be sad. He would fight dragons. He would beg. He would simp. But in the real version, the handsome prince lived happily ever after, with plenty of peace and quiet, making money and enjoying his life without the dead weight. The end. Think about the economics of that ending, because the princess said, no. The prince kept his castle. He kept his horses. He kept his gold. He kept his peace of mind. He didn't have to deal with HR complaints in the dungeon. He didn't have to worry about the princess taking half the kingdom. When she got bored 10 years later, her rejection was not a curse. It was a divine protection. This is the shift I need you to make in your mind. When you stop approaching, you aren't missing out. You are dodging bullets. Remember the rattlesnake? The man who walks away from the rattlesnake isn't a coward. He is alive. He is healthy. And he is free to go enjoy the rest of the desert. Men are finally waking up to the ultimate truth of the market. The only winning move is not to play. This isn't about hating women. Let me be clear. We don't hate the rattlesnake for being a rattlesnake. It is just doing what nature programmed it to do. It bites. It poisons. That is its nature. But we would be fools, absolute fools, to keep sticking our hands in the nest and expecting a different result. So, Here is my final call to action for you. Do not apologize for your standards. Do not apologize for your silence. When they ask you, why don't men approach anymore? You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain the data or the laws or the risk. You just smile. You look at your bank account. You look at your peaceful home. You look at your freedom. And you realize that you have already won. Invest in the only asset that will never wake up one morning and decide it doesn't love you anymore. Yourself. Build your body. Sharpen your mind. Stack your resources. Let the market crash. Let the desperate noise fade away. You are the prince who walked away, and that is your happily ever after. I am the Rational Risk Analyst. Class dismissed.